It is Tuesday, and if it is Tuesday, it is Jason Sukamel Day. It's time for recruiting updates. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. Jason brought out the green Adidas hat today. Jason, haven't seen that one in a long time, probably since last year.
The weed, some call it the weed hat, which I don't think that's what it means, but I don't know, man. It could be. So,
did you wear it yesterday for St. Patrick's Day, Jason?
I don't think so, because my daughter came up and pinched me, so I apparently didn't have any green on. So, but she was covered in green on when I pinched the hell out of her right back. So.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, fair is fair if it needs to be done. Jason, we're getting a chance to talk about one of my favorite topics. By the way, I'm just retweeting the stuff that the show has started. One of my favorite topics is always quarterbacks, right? Quarterbacks, wide receivers, defensive backs, all those kinds of things. And it's interesting because you had an opportunity. You were in Houston this past weekend, right?
Actually, Dallas area.
Yeah. Dallas. I played good back. So you're in Dallas and had a chance to catch up with a couple of folks. You also had a chance to catch up with Dia Bell, who's a 2026 commitment from the quarterback class. And you always want to, I always joke about it, but I told you before, Charlie Strong always said, hey, these kids are making reservations. And, it doesn't really count until the ink is dried. But I feel like you walked away feeling a little bit maybe encouraged, Jason. Can you give everybody like an update as to where Texas stands with Dia Bell?
Yeah, man. My mind's kind of going all over the place. But,
and where you were, by the way, as a setup.
Yeah, exactly. So we can talk about Dia Bell, and Charlie Strong's not wrong in a lot of cases that these are just holding reservations. We can also talk about Chris Stewart, the Texas wide receiver commitment. I actually saw him on Saturday as well. So how this went down where there's a big 7-on-7 tournament up it's in Dallas. It's called Overtime 7, OT7. It's a pretty big deal, but I've gone to it once or twice, but it's 4 consecutive weekends in a row. Okay. So they'll do it again this weekend, next weekend, and the 4th weekend for the championship.
7-on-7, like a 7-on-7 flag football tournament.
Yeah, just touch. I don't do flags, but touch, exactly. Dude, I mean, it's pretty well put together. Who funds this stuff? I don't know. You got kids from California playing on the South Florida elite team. Like, how does that happen, right? So you've got Texas kids playing on South Florida elite. So dude, I don't know how. I don't want to know how all this comes together, but it's a pretty cool. Like Cam Newton's heavily involved. Robert RG3's heavily involved. A lot of NFL guys. In fact, Cam was out there he was coaching. He has a team. He was out there coaching his team, and so that's pretty cool seeing Cam and his.
Yeah, that had to be cool.
Hats, I tell you what, I've seen Cam from a distance. But seeing him this weekend a little bit closer up, he's a big dude, man. Also, I was thinking, I can't imagine wanting to tackle that dude when he was in his heyday. Yeah, so
huge dude. Can't imagine wanting to fight the dude. You saw like years ago when he got into a fight at one of these. I think
it was at one of these 7-on. I think it was an OT7 tournament. Like 4 guys tried to fight him, and Cam held his own against all of them.
Basically held them off like that.
Yeah. Those tournaments are rough because when you go in and we'll get to Dia Bell. I'm sorry, but
no problem. Take your time.
I show up and you have to. Everybody's fans, media, everything. They had to search my bag. There's signs all over. No guns, no knives, no pepper spray. They have to wand you for a 7-on-7 tournament to make sure you're not carrying any weapons.
Wow.
Like, yes, dude. So,
that's not. You know what, Jason? When things like that occur, I'm always saying, well, there's a reason why they're doing this.
Yeah, they've had
people led up to it, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I tell you what, man, I'm sure they've had problems at some tournament somewhere, but. Everybody, it was a fun tournament to cover, honestly. Like, I'm not going to be able to go back this weekend because there's an Elite 11 here in Austin, which Dia Bell will be participating in. But I'm going to try to go back for one of these other 2. I basically just it was a long day, man. I made a day trip up there, watched a bunch of games, got a bunch of interviews, and then drove back Saturday night. So by the time I got home, it was a long day. But so let's get to what everybody wants to hear about. Dia Bell. Dia was there playing it wasn't the South Florida team. Actually, it was another team called Hellstar or something like that. But, and Dia's just coming off injury. He missed the tail end of his junior season. He's just finally getting released to kind of fully participate in these kinds of things. So Got a
He had
chance
like
to
a foot
watch him.
injury, right? He had like a foot injury.
Lower leg, I'd never heard specifically. I think it was probably more like knee, ankle. I just was told
Okay.
lower leg when it first happened.
Okay.
But the recovery, I know when it first happened, there was some hope he might come back towards the end of his senior year, but the recovery's taken a little bit longer. But he was out there moving around this week, or last weekend, I guess I should say. In fact, there was a couple plays. You don't see it often in 7-on-7, but quarterbacks can run. And there was one play where Dia took off and ran and moved really well. So I think he's, getting back to full strength. But got a chance to talk to him, excuse me, after one of his games. And, the obvious questions, just like, hey, Dia, talk about your commitment. And he just talked about, hey, Sark getting his contract extension. He said, that's good for me, knowing he's going to be there. The development with Sark and A.J. Milwee, how they develop quarterbacks. But then we were asking him about, like, hey, you've got schools like Georgia just offered you, Alabama, LSU, some others still coming at you. Like, who stays in touch with you? Then he mentioned a few, like he mentioned Georgia, Alabama, LSU, Ohio State, and Florida State. He said those are the main ones that still try to get him to show up to their campuses. They tell him things like, hey, you could come here and play early, so on and so forth. I don't think Dia's having any of it, man. Like he said, hey, I have no plans to visit anywhere other than Texas, not right now. I think something would have to change pretty significantly with Texas for that to change. I even asked him, and I didn't put this quote, I'm going to use it in a story later in the week. I just said, hey, Texas fans kind of get nervous, man, every time they see like Georgia offers you. And I said, should they be? And he's like, no, man, they shouldn't be nervous. He goes, he's pretty well locked in, Omar. And, we talked about Charlie Strong, if I could circle back. He's not wrong about a lot of guys using placeholders. That's not necessarily true with quarterbacks, especially quarterbacks at Texas. Arch committed early. Diabell obviously committed. KJ Lacey committed. Trey Owens committed early. And none of those guys ever wavered. Quarterbacks are kind of different because they commit early because they want to secure that usually one quarterback spot. They do it, and then they're usually loyal. And Diabell, that's certainly the case with Dia.
Yeah, the difference would have been a guy, let's say, like the anomaly would be like a Keelan Russell, who was committed to SMU, and then at that point decided that I'm going to flip to Bama.
And you kind of get it. No, with all due respect to SMU, really good program. It's on the come up, right? But at LSU and you got Alabama. I mean, come on. Not that SMU doesn't have deep NIL pockets, but that was kind of a guy looking for a bigger stage, maybe. But guys commit early to like Georgia's and Texas and Ohio State. They usually stick.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. And I always laughed about the Georgia offer. It seemed to be kind of late in the cycle for me, Jason, as far as that offer is concerned. As we look at the 2026 class, Jason, give everybody an understanding where Diabell kind of ranks amongst his peers, as amongst those quarterbacks are concerned. So you may have people who are just now saying, okay, may not be diehard recruit Knicks. Where's Diabell? What makes him so good? Why does Steve Sarkisian love him so much?
Yeah, he's on Rivals. He's ranked the number 8 quarterback in the country, 53 nationally, I believe. He actually dipped down a little bit, but again, he's been hurt. He hasn't been able to showcase himself like he's going to start doing, including this coming weekend in Austin. So I think he'll have a chance to move back up. I don't know for sure, Omar. I think one of the services has him as a 5-star. I believe that's true, but Rivals has him about 20 spots outside of that 5-star. So he could certainly climb into that level. Dia's about 6'2". He's a bigger kid than I remembered. I talked to him on the phone, and I've seen him, when he's come up to Texas for games and things. But this is the first time for me to truly stand by him and right next to him and talk to him. We've got him listed at 6'2", 200. He looks bigger to me than that in terms of just how he's filled out. He's he's big in the lower half. Kind of like I say the similar with Arch Manning. Like you don't realize how big Arch is until you see him like walk right past you. Like, oh damn, Arch is a big dude. So Dia's not quite as big as Arch, but he's a big, pretty well put together kid. What makes him so special? Really, he can just do it all, man. He's got a good head for the game. His dad was a professional basketball player, but obviously he's got athletic bloodlines, right? By the way, he's got a younger brother who's a really good basketball player. But Dia's, his dad wasn't a point guard, but Dia's almost like a good point guard. He sees things before they happen. He's just got a good head for the game. He's got a good arm. He can run the ball. he's not what I would call a dual threat quarterback because he's been more focused on his skills as a passer. Now, when he was younger, like I talked to his dad, oh, he'd run all over the field, but now he's trying to develop more as a passer. So he has that in him where he can take off and run, kind of like an Arch Manning. I mean, Arch is not a dual threat quarterback per se, but we've all seen what he can do with his legs, right? So, but yeah, Dia's just a total package, man. I mean, got a good head on his shoulders. He's smart. He's accurate. He's got a good arm. I had a clip on Twitter that I posted. It was like, oh, Dia goes deep for a touchdown. And he retweeted it, and I didn't really pay attention, but he said, hey, and that was like my fourth progression. And when I went and rewatched it, it was, man. He drops it in the bucket right over this guy's shoulder. So, yeah, it was like you look at it, he's kind of like looking here, and he goes across, and then all of a sudden, because then you have 4 seconds in that 7-on-7. You have a 4-second timer, and then it's considered a sack. So he knew that timer was going off. He worked through some of his progressions pretty quickly. Right before the timer went off, found his man with, maybe a yard separation, maybe behind the defender, about 40 yards downfield, and he dropped it right over his shoulders. It was a really nice throw, but just a good player overall. Almar, to answer your question, I mean, there's really not a weakness in his game.
And it's funny, Jason, one of the questions I wanted to ask you, and it kind of goes back to where we talked about like that Charlie Strong reference. The one thing I've noticed as relates to Sark is that when his quarterbacks commit to him, it's almost like it's done. I mean, they don't really waver. It's not like, hey, I'm committed, but I'm still going to keep taking visits. I mean, you can start with Quinn to a certain degree, but Quinn was kind of more of a transfer portal guy. You could go Malik Murphy. Malik Murphy had been committed to him for a long period of time. And even when Quinn was going to show up, when Malik was going to show up, Malik still stayed with his commitment. Arch Manning is another one. He committed, and that was it. And people thought, oh, he's probably going to still go and do certain things, and maybe he'll visit, and never wavered on that. Trey Owens is another one. We've got KJ Lacey, like now Dia. I mean, this is somewhat of a testament to Sark, right? To what him and AJ Milway are able to do, because once they go after a guy, once those guys get locked in, it's pretty much no looking back. Am I wrong as far as that assessment?
No, not at all. KJ Lacey would be the one who he went to see like some games and things, right? But he never took like an actual recruiting visit, or certainly not an official visits. And he was always very open with it. Dude, he's like, I like college football. If I can go see Alabama, Auburn, it's right here in my backyard, and they're going to, give me free tickets, I'm going to go see it, So he would go see a couple games like that. But he never once, he was always up front with the coaching staff. I don't even consider those recruiting visits. I mean, yeah, Alabama wanted them to be recruiting visits, or Auburn wanted them to be recruiting visits, but KJ never viewed them that way. But no, you're not wrong, man. It's pretty remarkable when you kind of lay it out like you just did, how solid, because all those guys commit so early. I mean, they all commit like the summer of their junior year. So, I mean, we're talking like in a couple months from now, Texas may have their 2027 guy committed already, right? So, I mean, that guy then has a year and a half to potentially look around, and none of them ever do. But it's a testament to the culture at Texas, Sark's ability as a recruiter, AJ Milway as well. It's honestly, it's about development. I mean, Texas is kind of starting with Quinn, and people see it now with Arch and Sark's history even before Texas. He's kind of a quarterback whisperer. If you're going to play under Steve Sarkisian, you've got a really good chance of going to the NFL. So, and it's going to be interesting. Arch will be here obviously this year, probably a second year, we think. What happens after that? Do you then start going to Trey Owens and then KJ Lacey, and then just go tick, tick, tick down the line where each guy gets 1 year? Or does someone like Dia Bell beat out those older guys, and Dia's your starter for 2 or 3 years? I don't know. But they're going to have a stacked, a full cupboard of really good quarterbacks. To we'll see how it plays out after Arch. But yeah, I mean, those guys don't look around, and it's a credit to, I think, what Sark's reputation, which is built on his history of recruiting and developing quarterbacks. I mean, we've seen guys he's coached play for 1 year and then go on and have good NFL careers, get drafted pretty highly. So yeah, I don't think you're wrong at all. That it's pretty remarkable that we don't see those quarterbacks shy away from competition, because they're not afraid of who else is in the room. And none of them really even look around once they give Sark that commitment.
And what's interesting too, Jason, is kind of staying online, because that was one of the other questions I was going to have. It almost seems like all these quarterbacks are committing are basically saying, all right, I'm ready for that 2027 competition, right? Because like you said, if Arch is 2025, and then more like, unless he just catches lightning in a bottle, right? Like, unless he just takes off and he's a Heisman finalist and Texas is in the semifinals on a national championship, you just say to yourself, there's nothing else for you to accomplish, right? You win it all. And then you say, all right, Archer, you're ready. And he'll only go when the family says he's ready to go, right? So we know, as they respect the process, it may not be one and done. So what the fascinating thing is, Jason, is at that point, Trey Owens by 2027 would have been on campus for what, 4 years?
3 years, right? Is he a true freshman this year? Good God, now we're not getting me questions.
Yeah, this is his freshman season, right?
It'd be going into his 4th year in the program, yeah. So
he'd be going into his 4th year. You would have had, so he would have been on the campus going.
KJ'd be going into his 3rd.
KJ, and then Dia would be going into his 2nd. And then who knows
behind him? You might have a true freshman guy like Peyton Houston, who's an elite quarterback that Texas might land in that 2027 class. So, hey, all cards are on the table there. Best man win. But, that's crazy, man. You want to reward Trey Owens, right? But what if KJ Lacey's just that good? I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, any one of those guys, I think, could be elite level starters for you. So, or do you, like I said, do you just go down the line? All right, Trey, you're next man up. And then after you get your 1 year, get out of here. KJ, you get your 1 year, get out of here. Tia, you get your 1 year, get out of here. Go down the line. I don't know. So it's going to be interesting for sure.
It just kind of along those lines, maybe one of the last quarterback conversations we'll have is, all right, if Dia Bell's locked in, then going to your point, so we start thinking about 2027, who are the contenders for Texas for that 2027 class? The guys that maybe between now and July could potentially commit and lock and solidify a spot for that 2027 class?
Right now, I mean, they've offered them. I'm pulling it up. They've offered one kid who committed. Brady Edmonds committed to Ohio State. The only other offer they have on the table now, there are a couple guys they're looking at, to potentially offer. Maybe they bring him in for camp visits. But the only other one is the guy I mentioned, Peyton Houston out of Louisiana, and he's a big-time prospect. I mean, I think he's just outside of 5-star by Rivals.com right now, but Rivals hasn't given out all their 5 stars. But I don't want to say he's down to Texas or Oklahoma, because LSU, he just visited LSU. LSU is going to be in play, obviously. He's number 5 in the country overall. So this guy's going to be a 5-star if he holds anywhere close to that mark. But Peyton Houston is a guy that's been to Texas a bunch. He visited for Junior Day late January. I would expect he'll be back probably this spring or summer for sure. There's a lot of chatter that could be Texas or Oklahoma there. Okay, well, who knows what's going to happen with Oklahoma and their coaching staff? A lot can happen in that situation. But Texas, Oklahoma, LSU. I mean, Peyton Houston is the one name to file away at this point. Nussmeier has a little brother too. There's a Nussmeier kid, and there's a couple other. There's another quarterback out of Louisiana. And again, there's a couple guys Texas has their eyes on. They'll probably bring guys into camp this summer, and we'll see what happens. But right now, Peyton Houston is certainly the name to
know. Jason, I want to pop one of your article on the screen here, and I kind of want to focus in a little bit on this portion, because you started talking about basically the calendar, and I figured it'd be easier from instead of you just running through everything. At least people can kind of see what we're talking about. These are the confirmations that you have for spring, right? You want to kind of go through this?
Yeah, and there'll be a lot more. These are just guys who have kind of told me or broadcast. You see Zarek Sidney, if you can stop right there at the very top on Mark. He actually visited last week, and I've got an update on him in this same column so people can read that in my 3-2-1. He's out of Arizona, 2027 wide receiver that Texas just offered recently. Came in and visited and said, hey, man, that visit kind of set the bar. Like, he's not calling Texas a leader or anything, but just loved that visit. Xavier Griffin Haynes is a Rivals 100 defensive end edge that Texas has offered. Texas is in the mix. They're playing from behind there. You look at Xavier Crowell coming in for that entire weekend. That's Texas Relays weekend, but he's coming in. No, I'm sorry. I'm getting my weekends confused. Let me look at my. I got so much crap on my calendar, I can't even keep up. That is Texas Relays weekend. I'm sorry. And I got him. Why do I have him as a defensive end? I need to fix that. He's coming in. Xavier Crowell is a running back out of Jackson, Alabama. I'm glad you pulled it up. I need to correct that. But he's coming in for that entire weekend. And then he's coming back in for his official visit in June. There's a lot of chatter. Now, he did just visit Florida, this last weekend. There's a lot of chatter that everybody thought he's going to Alabama. I'm hearing, hey, Texas has a really good chance. Yeah, thank you. And that's running back Xavier Correll. I'm going to fix that as soon as we get off here. Boobie Feaster. Everybody knows about Boobie.
Hey, by the way, Xavier Crowell, wasn't he the guy who was supposed to visit, and then as soon as Tashard Choice took the job, he says he was not visiting, and then a week later he said he's going to
You're exactly right. And I am updating him to running back. So if you refresh that, he'll now be a running back. But yes, he said he's not going to visit once Choice left. Chad Scott gets hired and comes in and calls him and says, "Okay, hey," and then he's like, "Hey, okay, I'm back on with this Texas visit. Hey, look at that, running back Xavier Crowell."
Hey, like it never happened.
Cut this little 2-minute segment out, but yeah. And then Chad Scott called him and he goes, "Hey, I'm that official visit's back on." Well, not only is the official visit, he's coming in for an unofficial visit. So you see March 29th, guys like Boobie Feaster, Jarraylen McCoy is a defensive end. He's interesting. He's coming in on the 29th. And then he has like a top 5 that he just released on Sunday. Well, Texas A&M was on his top 5. So I hit him up and I said, "Hey, are you no longer coming in on March 29th? And he goes, "No, in fact," he goes, "that's not accurate. That tweet is not accurate anymore. Texas is now in my top 5, not Texas A&M. And I'm going to come in for an official visit as well." So he's going to visit Texas on March 29th and then come in for an official visit. Zayden Krempin is an offensive lineman. We've probably talked about, I'm sure. Big time Texas target. He's been all over the place, man. I think he's at Michigan right now. He was at LSU last weekend. I think he's going to like Ohio State, Notre Dame. He's taken a ton of visits, but he's visited Texas a ton. He'll be back in Austin that first weekend of April. April 12th, I'm going to skip over Gavin Williams. Gavin Williams is a 2027 prospect, but April 12th, there's some really good. Well, there's Peyton Houston on where I mentioned Peyton Houston, the quarterback on there. That Blaine Bradford one's an interesting one there. I mean, he's a 5-star safety out of Louisiana. Everybody just assumes he's going to go to LSU, and he might. I mean, I would probably put my prediction on LSU, but Texas has done a pretty good job in the state of Louisiana. Now they lost Terry Joseph, who had some connections there, but I think their new edge coach, Coach Clark, I think has connections in LSU. So they still got some connections in the state. Will that help with Blaine Bradford? We'll see. But he's visited Texas a couple of times already. Damari Simeon, D tackle. Braden Rouse is an elite linebacker. Trenton Henderson, Brett Colajay. I'm down here at April 25th. He's an offensive lineman out of IMG Academy. He's visited Texas a ton. We'll see how hard Texas is going to push there. Texas has a lot of offensive line options. So if they push for Brett Colajay, Texas will be a factor. And then that Fan Fest, which used to be the spring game, but now the Fan Fest, that list will grow considerably. I'm thinking like, April 12th, April 26th. Texas usually has 1 or 2 kind of monster weekends where they have almost like a junior day. We haven't seen one of those pop up yet. We're just, okay, there's 20 names on this list, but I think we're going to start seeing some of these lists grow. But April 26th for Fan Fest, you see Diabell there. Cam Brickle is a defensive tackle that Texas just recently offered. Cam Hamil, we might have talked about him last week or the week before. Texas just offered him a cornerback out of Arizona. So lots of good players. I mean, these are all, not all, but a lot of, top 100, top Rivals 250 type players. So a lot of good talent coming in, kind of spread out over the course of the rest of March and pretty much all of April.
Jason, is there anybody, and I know you said the list will grow, but is anybody that you say that maybe it's not on this list that you would say, hey, Texas probably needs to get this person on campus, within the next few months, between now and the spring? Like, is there some other must-haves that Texas is in a mix for that you're waiting for them to say, okay, I'm going to visit Texas?
Yeah, the one big one would be Jalen Lott. the
Mhm.
wide receiver DB out of Frisco, Panther Creek. He visited LSU a couple, like 2 weekends ago. This last weekend, he was at Oregon,
Mhm.
and Oregon really made a splash there, according to other reports. I think it was on 3 national guy, Steve Wiltfong had a quote from him saying, "Hey, these are the 5 I'm looking at. Texas wasn't even a factor." This is a guy who both his parents went to Texas and were athletes at Texas. Everybody thought he was going to Texas. He does have his Texas official visit. So, I don't know. There's a small part of me that wonders, like, I mean, listen, we're trying to read 16, 17-year-olds' minds, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like, all right, is that a little gamesmanship on War that he didn't list Texas? But Texas is really a strong player there, or is it true? I mean, the thing is, Oregon's recruiting him as a wide receiver. Texas has been recruiting him as a defensive back. Texas just had a coaching change multiple coaching changes within its defensive backfield. So, there's a lot of moving parts in that one. But Jalen Lott is an elite player, and I mean, Texas, he's a legacy player. You've got to win that one. Caden Finley, I could put Caden Finley in that mix too. So, those two would probably be the guys that I would say, yeah, Texas could really help themselves by getting them on campus this spring. But right now, I haven't heard of any plans. They both have official visits, but nothing set in stone where they're going to come in for unofficial visits yet.
I was talking to Catch yesterday, and he said he felt like sometimes legacy players are sometimes the hardest ones to get for Texas.
It can go both ways. Yeah.
He pointed out like the Brockermeyers, and that was supposed to be a legacy thing, and that didn't happen.
Yeah, but Texas screwed that. That one should have happened. Texas screwed that recruitment up. So, and listen, I say screwed it up. Neither one did much of anything in Alabama. So, I mean,
fact. Well, yeah, but that's the hindsight of 2020, right? As far as not being able to see it. Mark Anthony asked a question, just kind of generic. Defensive line, I think you may have gone through it, but any highlights as far as Texas and guys that they're recruiting on the D line?
Let me pull up this offer. They have. I tell you what, is it Mark? Yeah, Mark. I did my recruiting board last week, and I'm going to update it again this week. Kenny Baker, every time I do that recruiting board, nicest guy in the world probably, but Kenny Baker's on my shit list because he has so many scholarship offers out. It's like, oh, it's my brain explode having to put all those guys in there. Like I'm just going down the list. Dylan Berryman is a defensive tackle out of Louisiana. He's a name to file away. I wrote about him, I think, last week. He's told me, hey, it's Texas and USC are his top 2. Okay, he's a kind of a rising defensive tackle. I mentioned Cam Brickle out of IMG Academy. He's visiting Texas later in the spring. Tiki Hola's out of Bastrop, a defensive tackle that Texas was all over him early on, but things have kind of cooled there. He's scheduled all these other official visits, and he doesn't have one scheduled with Texas. So I think that one's kind of dying on the vine, if you will. And I think it might be maybe that Texas isn't pushing quite as hard. Jamian Winfield caught everybody by surprise. I think was it Friday? Yeah, it was Friday morning. He up and commits to USC, and we're all like, whoa, where'd this come from? He is committed to USC. Everybody I've talked to said, hey, that thing ain't over. That's not even close to being over. So don't give up on Jamian Winfield, the talented defensive tackle out of the Houston area. Defensive end, excuse me, there's a lot of them. I mean, I can go down the list, but Jaraylin McCoy, we've talked about. Bryce Perry Wright is a guy out of Georgia that's going to visit Texas officially. There's a ton of edge players, Xavier Griffin Haynes, Jake Krull, Peyton Porter, Sean Scott's a guy out of Louisiana. out of California. There's a lot of them. So there's a lot of names, I guess. Mark is the short answer, but we're still kind of waiting for that picture to come into a little bit more focus. I mean, if you look at my recruiting board, which I'll update again this week, there's a ton of names on the board, which I only put them on the board if they have a legitimate interest in Texas, if they visited Texas. Otherwise, there's a little category below it where it just says, hey, they're on the radar, right? I'm not putting them on the actual board. But there's a lot of guys on the actual board for defensive line. We're just kind of waiting to see how that picture, how things unfold there. But it's a little too early to make any bold predictions there.
Wags, and I know we're getting to the tail end here, but Wags,
I'm glad you put this one up. Yeah.
With predictions getting put in for LSU for Boobie Feaster, how far behind would you put Texas in that recruitment, Jason?
Yeah, I haven't put in a prediction like a future cast, but I've been on record for a couple months now saying like LSU is probably the team I would pick. Maybe A&M and Texas has kind of been fading there. And some of that's kind of, I don't say by design, right? Texas likes Boobie Feaster, but sometimes coaching viewpoints don't align with recruiting rankings and headlines and players that get all the headlines. And Boobie's a fantastic player and like just an awesome kid. I wish I could say, hey, he's going to wind up at Texas because I like covering Boobie Feaster. He truly is one of my favorite dudes to cover. But yeah, how far behind? It's a pretty sizable gap, Wags, and I don't see Texas making up that gap. The only way that changes is if when he visits later in April, if they can somehow work it out to get an official visit out of him. He's got his 4 official visits. None of them are to Texas. Texas would have liked to have brought him in June. Boobie's like, hey, my June is filled up. I'll come in May. Texas said, no, we don't do that. So in Texas, just, if it was Arch Manning, maybe they would bend the rules a little bit, right? But I just don't know that Boobie's viewed as, they love him. They want him. They would take him. But there's also a lot of other really good receivers, including a couple guys I talked to at that OT7 that I'll be writing about later today. So keep an eye out for that. But
so what's the deal with May though, Jason? Like
you can take official visits in May and even April. And a lot of schools do it. SMU does a lot of early official. Texas only does theirs in June. I don't, that'd be a good question for Sark. Like, I don't know if it's just like, hey, we've got, they end spring practice the end of April. So that, May, I don't know what, they're doing scouting and other things, but maybe they're taking vacation. Hell, I don't know. But Texas just traditionally, or under Sark, they have not done any May official visits, certainly no April official visits, Sark said at his press conference, hey, you got to change, you got to adjust with the times. So maybe they will adjust. But as of right now, they have no May official visits scheduled. Every other school that I can think of, or most other schools, they have May official visits, but Texas only does June. They like to have those 3 big weekends in June. And hey, who am I to argue, right? They're the number 1 recruiting class.
And then we'll end it with this. Money B wants to know what's going on with the defensive end out of Temple. He doesn't name him. He just knows the defensive end out of Temple.
Jamarian Carlton. And listen, you guys get sick of me saying another one of my favorites. I love Jamarian Carlton, so I wish it was working out for Texas. But it's just kind of trending the wrong direction. He did visit LSU last weekend. I need to get in touch with Jamarian, actually, Money B. I'm going to work on that this week. I tried last week, and Jamarian's always super responsive. But last week, he kind of went quiet. Well, sometimes that's a sign in itself, right? Jamarian knows who I write for him. He and I talk a bunch. But he did visit LSU. You see the Texas Future cast. That might even be mine, I'm not even sure. But if it is, I might want to change it. I think Texas is just, again, they had some change in the coaching staff, and maybe they don't view Jamarian quite as highly as some others. They don't have an official visit set up. Jamarian's taking his time with that. So he doesn't have any visits set up with Texas right now. So, we'll see if that changes. Maybe if he comes in that April 26th and maybe Coach Clark gets eyes on him and says, okay, hey, this dude's legit. Let's pick up the intensity. But right now things are kind of cooling with Jamarian in Texas, kind of mutually, and kind of that attention is shifting in other directions.
All right. And I'm also just thumbing through here. A lot of activity in 2024. Looks like you said he visited Texas earlier this year, though. It looks like
he was at LSU this week. He was.
You got. There's a January.
Yeah, he was at the junior day. Yeah, yes, that's where that. Had to refresh my brain, but yeah, I did get a picture of him at the junior day. I didn't talk to him, but I did get a picture. But yeah, he attended the Texas Junior Day in late January. Okay. But Coach Clark had not been hired at that point, so.
Gotcha.
Some moving parts with Jamarian Carlton.
There you go. They ask and asking you shall receive. All right, Jason, get out of here, buddy.
Okay,
I'll see you in our meeting in a little bit and at the podcast at noon.
Okay.
All right, see you. Jason Suckermel, orangebloods.com, with all your recruiting updates. If you missed it, it showed up late. Just go back, hit the rewind button, scroll back, and you guys can go from the beginning of the show. I'll be back at noon for the modcast. as you can see. Not at home at this moment. Don't get no ideas. Got security. I got nosy neighbors. Don't get no ideas, y'all. So, in any case, though, chilling out of town with my girl here in the lovely city of San Antonio. So, be here for the week, broadcasting here for the week, and then, of course, returning home next week. But I will give you shows every single day, so you do not have to worry about that. As I always say, live each day like it was your last, because one day it will be. So go out, do something special for yourself, enjoy yourself. It's a beautiful day out here. It's cold in the morning, beautiful in the afternoon. So have a special one. I'll be back at noon for the Modcast. Until then, y'all take care.